in your early days, when you were, I'd just like to ask you a couple of things about your upbringing. Can you tell me what your parents' names were? Can I have that? Do you have that?
William and Emma.
And your mother's maiden name?
Whelan, Irish.
Whelan?
Whelan, same as Tim Whelan, you remember him?
Oh, Whelan.
Whelan.
W-H-E-L-A-N. And your father, what did your father do?
Well, originally he was a wholesale and retail fruit and vegetable.
Really? He must have had something to do with Covent Garden.
There were men who came up to me, very old men, and said, I knew your father used to buy here. I remember as a child going with him into the countryside, and he would buy a whole field of cabbages, flat fields, you know. Very interesting, you know.
Oh, that's
While they're still in the ground, you know.
Yeah. But your parents had no artistic inclinations?
None at all.
And how did you decide you wanted to be involved? You have an artistic bent as a child? You could draw, or?
Don't know. I think it grew. I think the important thing was that I was a devotee of films, you know.
You like to go to movies?
Oh yes, very young age. And, you know, about the age of 15 or 16, I wouldn't read fan magazines. I read trade papers.
What films did you like as a child? Do you remember? What you were most impressed with? Or what you liked to go to see?
Oh, I don't know, crazy things. In later years, I remember I had the craziest idea. There was a film came out made by First National, which I liked very much. It was a wild film. It was called The Isle of Lost Ships. Did you ever see that?
I've heard of it. I never saw it.
Well, it's supposed to take place in the Sargasso Sea, in a kind of a whirlpool. And it was ships that had been caught in this whirlpool. And it was made up of Spanish galleons that hadn't sunk. This whirlpool kept them afloat, going around very, very slowly. And it even had a submarine caught there. And a colony of people were living on these ships. And there was a kind of a seaman who was a kind of lord and master of the whole thing. And he was waited on by the others. There were women there who cooked food. Where they got the food from, I don't know. And he even put on black tie for dinner. And into this, a detective is taking a man back. Milton Sills was the man, taking him back from South America. And they got wrecked on this thing. And it was wild. It was really wild, but fascinating idea.
And that was the film you liked as a child very much?
Yes, and then also the other thing was the escape. How the detective and the criminal, they were almost handcuffed together, and he had to undo the handcuffs, got themselves shot out through the torpedo tube of the submarine.
And that was how they escaped. Were you impressed particularly with Griffith?
Oh yes, the Griffith. The Orphans of the Storm, Way Down East. You remember that Way Down East?
Very well.
What does that look like today?
Very good.
Is it?
Well, the story's, a little bit East Lynne, but it's...
Oh yeah, sure. It's a little girl who comes into the city, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's very effectively directed.
Floating of the ice
Remarkable.
toward the waterfall.
Yeah.
Was very well done.
And...
because Orphans of the Storm, I saw that recently. That's the French Revolution, and Danton riding to the rescue.
It was well directed.
To save the child.
I remember he keeps cutting to the insert of of the guillotine.
Yes, the knife,
The
the
little-
head below
yes.
the thing.
And the little knot latch that holds the guillotine up. It starts to
Yes, oh
slip.
yes, sure, yeah. I read, where was it I read? In the London Times somewhere, I think. It was in Bernard Levin's column, apropos of the guillotine, about a very famous Chinese executioner. And he was so swift and adept at his job that on one occasion the condemned man walked up the steps of the scaffold onto this platform, and the executioner stands slightly behind him, and with a swift blow of this very thin sword, he once dealt the blow, and the man said, "Mr. Executioner, don't keep me waiting in my agony." And the executioner said, "Just nod your head, sir, would you please?"
Oh, and the guy was dead.
He's already dead, and the head would have fallen off.
Oh my God.
Isn't that a horror?
Horrible story. You think it's true?
No, I don't know how to tell it.
Oh, horrible story. Did you see much of Lubitsch's German films?
Oh yes, on Polar Negri
Yeah.
and Lang's early films. I mean, Lubitsch did do Barry. You
Right.
know. They were all very
They had an impact on you.
big films. Oh sure.
How did you get into pictures?
I was in an engineering firm. See, I went to a school of engine. I went after I left the Jesuits. I was asked, what do I want to be, you know? And, you know, kids say, oh, I want to be a fireman or an engineer. So I said, maybe an engineer. So they took me at my word. They sent me to a school of engineering and navigation. And it's a funny thing. In the same class, do you know Hugh Gray?
Yes, the professor.
Well, he was in the same form
Oh my
as a
goodness.
Jesuit. He went off to Oxford, ended up a professor. I went the other way, went to the School of Engineering and Navigation, and learned everything. I've turned a lathe, screw cutting, and blacksmith shop, and draftsmanship, electricity, and mechanics. Oh, I went through the whole course, the whole thing. And it was through the draftsmanship that I was able to become later on an art director.
Yeah.
And wood cutting, and learning to cast metal, molten metal and so forth, chemistry. And then I got a job in an engineering firm that made electric cables. Clerical job, but you had to have some knowledge of electricity, you see. And while I was there, I got into the advertising department. And I became a layout man, designing ads.
You were quite young at the time.
Yeah, I was about 18 then, 17 or 18. And then I found out that a company called Famous Players Lasky were opening a studio in London. And I said to the advertising manager, I think I can get some extra work here by designing their titles, which is the same as designing ads. It's words and picture.
Right.
So I found out what their first film was going to be, and I designed a whole main title.
You remember what it was?
It was called The Sorrows of Satan, a Victorian novel. And of course I employed my own design, lettering men and illustrators and so forth. So I had one made up, and then I went along, got an appointment, and of course the man was shocked to see, here's they hadn't finished building the studio. And I said, there's the title of your first picture. He was very impressed.
Did they use it?
No, because they changed the film, you see. They went in for a Drury Lane melodrama, so I did another one. So eventually I got the job, but I was still doing the other job. And then gradually I got into the studio. I shared the proceeds with the advertising manager, what we got. And he let me go off for certain days, and I went on the set and became a kind of a third assistant. And then one day they said, why don't you come here instead of working on your own, into the editorial department. So I got into the editorial department, which was run by a man called Tom Geraghty, the father of Carmelita Geraghty, who used to write all Douglas Fairbanks scripts.
Right.
And his partner, his assistant was a man called Mordaunt Hall.
Yes.
Mordaunt Hall was the New York Times critic.
Right.
Now they would supervise the writing of the scripts by the Hollywood scriptwriters, who were all middle-aged women. So I learned script writing from these women, and being in the department, I used to be sent out on odd jobs to I wanted an extra shot of this or that. I had to go out to the cameraman and do it. And that's how I learned script writing. So eventually the studio closed down. And when you walked in, you might just well be in Hollywood because all the directors were. I think Donald Crisp was the director then.
Yes.
Anna Q. Nilsson, James Kirkwood, all these well-known names of those days, are silent films. And the studio closed down, so then we were all out of work until they started to rent the studio, and then I got a job as assistant director on a picture coming up called Woman to Woman. And they said we're going to need somebody to write a script. So they said, do you know anybody? I said, I'll do it. They said, what do you know about script writing? So I said, here's a script I've written. And I had taken a story, it belonged to Universal actually, by I.A.R. Wiley, I think. And they read the script and they said, oh, it's pretty good. All right, you get the job. Then later on, my friend, the art director, said he couldn't come. He was going on another job, so they said, we don't have an art director. I said, I'll do that as well. And for 3 years, I did both, wrote the script and did the art direction.
What was the film Always Tell Your Wife?
Oh, that was a two-reeler. That was
A two-reeler?
That was a two-reeler with a man called Seymour Hicks. He was a big name on the London stage. And that was one of the jobs, you know, when the studio became a rental studio, that I got the job to assist the director on that and just put the sets up and do everything. And then one day this man Hicks got into a row with the director. He fired him. He said to me, let's you and I finish this on our own.
So you did. What was the director's name? Do you remember?
Don't remember his name now.
And that was actually the first film you sort of directed, but you didn't. You were just working with Hicks. Yeah. Then when you worked on Woman to Woman and The White Shadow, I think these were all directed by Graham Cutts, The Passionate Adventure, and The Blackguard.
That's right.
And The Prude's Fall.
That's right.
Were any of those anything particularly?
Woman to Woman was a big success. Passionate Adventure was that was Clive Brook and Alice Joyce. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah.
And Victor McLaughlin. And one day, Balkan, the producer, said to me, Cutts doesn't want you anymore. I was the victim of politics.
Or envy or jealousy or?
Apparently. I was told that afterwards, yes. He said, would you ever like to direct a picture? I said, it never occurred to me.
It hadn't really?
Not at all. I had no idea directing a picture or anything.
And that's when you got the chance to do Pleasure Garden?
They had this thing, they had a script writer, and that was, I was sent off to Germany, to Munich, to direct it in German. I took my own assistant with me, art director and so forth.
And the girl that was to become Mrs. Hitchcock, she worked on it?
She worked on it, yes. And the star was Virginia Valley.
Right.
brought over from Hollywood.
And Carmelita Garrity.
She brought her with her. She played in the picture as well.
Were you nervous making your first picture as a director?
No, not particularly. Didn't bother me very much.
Except for all the problems of getting the money and everything.
Oh, that was a different thing.
Balkan sort of threw you in the water and said swim.
Sure. That's when Balkan came over to Munich when the picture was finished.
And made that comment.
Yes.
Yeah. What was the Mountain Eagle? Is that
That was terrible. They sent me, it's a village schoolmistress story, but they sent over a woman called Nita Naldi.
Right.
Well, she was the successor to Theda Bara, the vamp of all time, playing a village schoolmistress with nails an inch long.
Oh my God.
Oh, it was awful.
It was just an assignment that you were stuck with?
Oh, yes, sure.
I was shot, however, in Munich.
Shot interiors Munich, exteriors in Austria, in the Tyrol.
Right. And after that came The Lodger. Now,
The Lodger.
Did you pick that as a subject?
Oh, yes, sure. That's The Lodger when it was finished. Cutts, who was still in the company, Balkan had gone to America, and Cutts, when Balkan returned, said to Balkan, he said, I've been looking at the rushes. I can't make a head and tail of them. You don't know what the hell he's shooting. And eventually the film was shown to the distributor's publicity woman and chief accountant. Now they're the two people. The father of the Wolf brothers, sent down, and they went back and gave a very bad report. So the following day, he came down to verify it, because Ivan Novello, who was the biggest leading man in England, was playing the lead. And I remember Alm and I walked for 1.5 miles, waiting to see what the result would be. We got back to the studio. I said, we better get in a cab. So we got in a cab and we drove back, and there were long faces. He said they're going to put the film on the shelf, which they did for 2 months, and then they decided to
try it.
Had a trade show. They had old trade shows in those days. And the notices came out, the greatest British film ever made. Okay. That was a fine line.
Yeah. Well, one would think that from then on you could do whatever you wanted with reviews like that, and the picture probably made money, didn't it?
I mentioned so, yes.
But
I went with another company then.
Which is where you made Downhill.
Well, Balkan borrowed me back from the new company.
What was the new company?
British National Pictures.
But you didn't do anything for them?
Eventually I did, yes,
but
sure.
Not for a couple of years, because first you made Downhill and then...
No, I made 4 pictures in 1 year. Downhill, Easy Virtue,
The Ring?
The Ring, and The Farmer's Wife.
All in 1 year?
All in 1 year.
My goodness.
1927.
Yeah.
That included exteriors on the Riviera for Easy Virtue. Exteriors for The Farmer's Wife.
You said something that was some interesting thing you did in Easy Virtue, some trick shot that you told me about the other night, and I can't remember what it was now.
Oh, well, that was the judge singling somebody out, a counsel, an attorney, through a spyglass. I had a problem of enclosing in a spyglass through a monocle, you see. And the way I did it, I had to make it oversized so it was in focus, you see. But I put a mirror in the thing and put the character behind the camera and put a double in the long shot.
Right. And then when the monocle came up to the camera,
you saw the man in close up.
Yeah. Was Downhill? What was that? Anything to speak of?
That was a play written by Ivan Novello. Terrible. Oh. The dialogue. When Novello he's a man in his 30s, playing a boy at school.
Oh.
And he gets expelled because I was supposed to have had some affair with a girl in the village. And when he's expelled, he says to the headmaster, does that mean I won't be able to play for the old boys, sir? And I remember the key shot. His father throws him out of his house, and he starts on his. It's like a sort of rake's progress story. Starts on his way down, and I used the underground escalator.
Mm.
That was the start downhill.
I see.
Very naive in those days. And I remember that night, shooting that night, because when we used to go to a first night in the theatre, one always wore white tie and tails in those days.
Mm-hmm.
An opera hat, not a shiny topper, but a soft silk hat.
Mm-hmm.
A dull silk hat. And we couldn't shoot until after midnight, after the last train had gone. And I directed this scene in white tie and top hat. Most elegant moment of direction I've ever had.